I found the largest cabinet door possible to put the 7 most popular Alkyd enamel paints to the test in a side-by-side comparison. Now, Alkyd enamel paint is known for being great for cabinets and furniture, but we're actually going to get close and test each one. For each color, I brushed it, I rolled it, and I sprayed it with 2 coats, and then I tested out how well each one held up to staining and scrubbing. I can't wait to share the results with you on this one. I will say, the type of paint does matter, and some of these paints did perform better than others, and cure time also matters. So I will share all those details with you, as well as details about every single one of these brands of paint. So hopefully you can choose the best paint for your next project. We're testing Insl-x Cabinet Coat, which is made by Benjamin Moore, Dutch Boy Cabinet Door and Trim, which is sold at Menards, Sherwin-Williams Emerald, Sherwin-Williams ProClassic, Behr Urethane Alkyd Enamel, which is sold at Home Depot, Valspar Cabinet and Furniture, which is sold at Lowe's, and Benjamin Moore Advance. First, I primed the entire door using one of my favorite stain blocking and bonding primers, Synthetic Shellac. I have a full side-by-side comparison testing those primers. I'll link it above once I finish making it. Before I get into the detailed results of each type of paint, here's a little bit of background on the test. I bought a new can of each type of paint and had it shook up at the store right before I used it. Before you come at me for changing up the experiment by using different colors, first, I would say you're right. But second, I ended up buying some mist tint paints to save a ton of money and also bought colors that I was going to use on future projects. I used a Purdy brush, the same brush on every single paint. I also used a 1/4-inch mohair roller. I did a side-by-side test, testing the best paint rollers, especially for use with Alkyd paint. You can check that out linked above. Alkyd paint is known for how well it applies when you brush and roll it, but I also wanted to spray this paint. So I made sure to spray every single one. Now this is the place I noticed the biggest difference between the paints. I'll make sure to share that with you as well. A quick note on spraying. I use my Wagner Flexio 4000 sprayer, which does allow you to control airflow and material flow somewhat. But I'm a DIYer and I use a DIY-friendly sprayer. It's not going to give as much control as professional paint sprayers. With that being said, if you are a professional painter and you have some exact settings and tips on how to spray some of these paints, please feel free to leave them in the comments. I think they'd be helpful for others. I'm harnessing my inner child and I'm gonna get my hands covered in grease and I'm not gonna wash them, and then I'm gonna touch everything, including newly painted kitchen cabinets. And then I'm still not gonna wash them. We'll add a little more. Kids are really gross. This ketchup, mustard, and olive oil has been sitting on these doors for a full 24 hours. This side of the cabinets was painted 90 days ago, so it had a full 90-day cure time. Now I ran this test after a 30-day cure time on this side, and then my SD card went out and I lost all the video footage, so I decided to redo the clip to actually get that footage, but also I'm really curious to see if any of the paints hold up better after a 90-day cure time than that 30-day cure time. I scraped and scrubbed the heck out of these doors to see which paints could hold up the best. And it was actually surprisingly hard to get the dried mustard off, so it required me to have to scrub a ton, which was good. We could see which paints did the best. There were a few paints that didn't perform as well after the 30-day cure that did better after the 90-day cure, so I will be sure to share that with you in a second when I talk about each of the paints. Later on, I'm going to put these doors to the ultimate scratch test to see which ones hold up the best, because I think durability is one of the most important factors when painting your cabinets. Be sure to stick around for that. All right, it's time to dig into the nitty-gritty details of each of these brands of paint. I've ranked them worst to best. Now, there are a few that I will never buy again, but most of them perform pretty well. So even if they weren't my top favorite, I still will be using some of these brands for different purposes. I'll be sure to share why for each type. First up, and in this case first is really the worst, is Behr Urethane Alkyd Enamel Paint, sold at Home Depot in satin, semi-gloss, and gloss. Now, I used this paint on my own kitchen cabinet 6 years ago, and now that I've used all these other brands, I'm wishing I hadn't. It is the least expensive brand, which is nice, and it does still brush and roll well. It's a hybrid Alkyd paint, so it's going to level and finish better than just slapping some regular paint on your cabinets. It also has a pretty fast recoat time of as quick as 4 hours, which is nice. But of all the different types that were tested, it levels the least well, which means that you can see some brush strokes and some stipple marks from the rollers and the brush even after it dries, whereas many of these other brands don't do that. The brush drags quite quickly, so the open time isn't as long, which again causes some of these leveling issues. It does not spray well. No matter what setting I put it on, I had this difficulty when I painted my own kitchen cabinets too, and I ended up having to water it down, which they say you're not supposed to do. So if you're planning to spray, do not use this paint. And the worst part of it, probably of all of them, is it's not very durable. It's the least durable of all the brands. I was able to scratch off paint after 24-hour cure time. After a 30-day cure time, when I scrubbed it, paint was coming off and dulling. And even after a 90-day cure time, it was still scrubbing away. And some of the paint was actually getting on the sponge. And that's the only brand that did that. So for all of these reasons, I will not be buying this paint again. Thankfully, I did find the best cabinet paint in Home Depot when I did a side-by-side test on my basement cabinets. I'll link that video above. Next up is Valspar Cabinet and Furniture Oil-Enriched Enamel. Although it doesn't actually say Alkyd, that's what it means by Oil-Enriched. This is Valspar's version of a hybrid Alkyd, comparable to all the rest of the paints in this video. It's obviously a well-known brand available at Lowe's, Ace, and many other stores, and it comes in satin, semi, and gloss. This paint is on the thinner side, but it brushes, rolls, and sprays very nicely. Your brush will not drag, and it has a pretty long open time, so you can go back and kind of fix things if they happen without it affecting the paint in any way. It levels very well to a very smooth finish. You really won't be able to see many brush strokes or other marks if you decide to brush and roll. It is in the lower price point bracket, and it has a fast recoat time. Overall, you might be wondering, so why is this the second worst paint in this lineup? And the main reason I would say is because I've had inconsistent results with it. I've used this paint on 2 different projects and also in this side-by-side test, and the 2 different cans have performed quite differently. I used it on my camper cabinets, and I did a review of the paint in a video, which I'll link above. And one of the issues I was having is that it was sagging and dripping a ton, way more than normal, but it did dry to a pretty durable finish. Now, the second can I used, I didn't have this dripping and dragging problem, but the problem I had in this test was that the finish, which both cans were satin, was much more matte, and because of that, it didn't feel as durable. It could easily get scuffed up and was scrubbing away a little bit even after a 30-day cure time. Whereas in my camper cabinets, the finish was more slick and it held up really well. So I can't quite speak to what's true and what's not for this paint. I've had readers tell me that it's wonderful and they love it. I've also had readers echo some of the same concerns that I've had. So I don't really know. Would I use this paint again? I would maybe give it a try, but I've got a few other brands that I like better. So I'm probably going to let this one sit on the shelf and reach for some of the ones that I know will give me the same results over and over again, no matter which can I grab. Next up is Dutch Boy Cabinet Door and Trim Paint. Dutch Boy is sold at Menards and is a mid price point, which makes it budget friendly. It's a thinner paint, but it applies really beautifully when you brush, roll, and spray. It applies off the brush really nicely and it levels to a very smooth finish. I use this paint in my camper cabinet and have been really pleased with the application and the durability. The main drawback to Dutch Boy is that it's just not as durable as the remaining paints in this lineup. Although it applies really nicely, I was able to scratch away some of the paint after a 24-hour dry time. After the 30-day cure time, it was more durable, but the satin finish still scuffs up a little easier than some of the other paints I'm going to talk about in a second. Now, I haven't tried the semi-gloss, and because it applies really well, I will probably try this paint again, mainly because of how easy it is to spray, brush, and roll. I think next time I'll try a semi-gloss, but it's a budget-friendly option that I was pleased with on both the projects I've used it on. But this next paint did edge out Dutch Boy slightly, based solely on the durability, and that paint is Insl-x Cabinet Coat. It's made by Benjamin Moore, but at a lower price point than Advanced. It's sold at Ace and can be color tinted there, as well as some other places I'm sure, but I'm not totally sure where. This paint brushes and rolls beautifully. Although it's thick, it has a long open time, which means you can touch up places, and the brush just glides through the paint, which is what we're looking for. It levels really well without any visible brush strokes or roller marks once it dries. Now, my favorite part of this paint is actually the durability. It is excellent. After 24 hours, I could not even scratch this paint off with my fingernail, and it stood up to scrub tests as well. It has a recoat time of about 6 hours, which is decent, and you can still easily get 2 coats of paint on your cabinets within a day. The drawback to this paint is that it is thick, and this makes it really difficult to spray. I was only able to get this out of my sprayer at full air power and full material flow, which is not ideal. So, if you're planning to paint a piece of furniture or your cabinets with only a brush and roller, I would highly recommend this paint, primarily for its levelability and its durability. I will definitely be using it again as long as I don't plan on spraying it. We're moving on to the highest bracket of paints, and all three of these brands are also the most expensive, so I guess you really do get what you pay for. This is Sherwin-Williams Interior Water-Based Acrylic Alkyd Paint. Do not confuse this paint with ProClassic Interior Acrylic Latex. That is fabulous for walls, but will not work very well on cabinets. This one comes in satin, semi, and gloss, and is obviously made by Sherwin-Williams. ProClassic has the fastest recoat time of all in as little as 3 hours. It applies really nicely when you brush it and roll it, and levels really well with very little brush strokes or roller marks. One of the great things about this paint is it's very durable. These top 3 paints are the most durable of all of them, along with Insl-x, which we saw just a little bit ago. The durability is really why I'm putting these at the top. Now, ProClassic paint is a little thicker than some of the others, which makes it slightly difficult to spray. It's not as difficult to spray as Insl-x, and I was able to find a pretty open setting for the paint to come out, but that's just something to keep in mind. If you don't have those adjustments on your sprayer, this one might not be the best choice. There's also a very slight brush drag. It has a slightly shorter open time than some of the other paints, which just makes it a little harder to apply. It doesn't feel as smooth, but I was really surprised to see that even if my brush started to drag a little bit, it didn't turn into brush strokes later. Usually when your brush drags, it means that you're gonna see some of those brush strokes once it dries, but that wasn't the case for this paint. This paint and the other Sherwin-Williams paint, which we'll talk about in a second, are definitely the most expensive at a little over $100 a gallon, but they do offer sales. I see them as much as 40% off, which then puts this paint in that mid price point, similar to Dutch Boy or Insl-x. All in all, it's a great paint. I would recommend it, but if I'm gonna get a Sherwin-Williams paint, I actually have one that I like better. That's coming up in a minute. Now on to Benjamin Moore Advanced, the second best paint in this entire lineup. It's the only Alkyd paint that comes in a matte finish, which is actually still really durable, but it also comes in satin, semi, and gloss. It brushes, rolls, and sprays beautifully. The paint glides off the brush without brush dragging, and it levels really well. You will not really see brush strokes or roller marks with this paint. It's also very durable, one of the most durable of all the paints. Even after 24 hours, I could not scratch off this paint with my fingernail. It is one of the more expensive brands, around $75 a gallon right now. So not quite as much as Sherwin-Williams, but if you use a coupon at Sherwin-Williams, Advance is gonna cost more. There are 2 main drawbacks that put this paint in second place for me. The first is it has a long recoat time. You have to wait 16 hours to put your second coat on, which is just annoying sometimes. The second is an issue that I've only had pop up with 2 cans of paint, and I've used this paint at least 10 to 12 times with different cans on both cabinets and furniture. The problem I've had is with tiny micro bubbles everywhere when I'm rolling it on a super flat surface like laminate. Now, the only time I've had this happen is with 2 cans of paint that had already been sitting on my shelf for a little while. I thought it was just a me problem or a temperature problem, so I ended up moving the piece inside and doing all the things to avoid micro bubbles, and it just would not stop. I ended up having to switch to Sherwin-Williams Emerald for the paint test I was running to not have these micro bubbles happen. Like I said, it's only happened twice, and my best guess is that the paint had just been sitting too long, so maybe Advance doesn't have as long of a shelf life as other paints, because I've let other paints sit that long and have not had this problem. All in all, I would recommend this paint. I like this paint, and I will still continue to use this paint. It is really great. But there is one more brand that I find to be better that I will be using when I repaint my own kitchen cabinets because it's the best. I'm sure you know where this is going, but the hybrid Alkyd paint that performed best in this side-by-side test was Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane Trim Enamel. Now, Sherwin-Williams has an emerald line with another paint in it. It's called Emerald Acrylic Latex. Again, that's great for walls, but not for cabinets. However, Emerald Urethane Trim Enamel is amazing for cabinets and furniture. Now, for a long time, I avoided buying this paint because of the price. I just couldn't justify spending over $100 on a gallon of paint. However, once I started looking into it, I realized that Sherwin-Williams stores run sales quite often, anywhere from 20% to upwards of 40% off. So once I saw one of those sales, I had to give it a try on a piece of furniture, and I was amazed. It performed equally well in this side-by-side test. It is the perfect consistency for paint, not too thick and not too thin. It brushes, rolls, and sprays beautifully. It glides off the brush and levels extremely well. The best of any of the brands. When I brush this paint, it looks almost like it does when I spray it. It's also extremely durable. I cannot scratch it with my fingernail after 24 hours, and the same thing holds true after 30 days and 90-day cure time. The paint isn't going anywhere. Plus, it has a fast recoat time of only 4 hours, so you can easily get 2 to 3 coats done in one day, which in my mind makes it better than Advanced just for that reason. Now, it is the most expensive brand, but with some of those sales, you can get it down to that mid price point range of paints. Right before publishing this video, I couldn't help myself, and I did one final durability test with everything I could find in my kitchen cabinet. In a nutshell, none of the paints held up to the scouring pad or the knife. Valspar and Behr scratched and scuffed the easiest with almost all of the utensils. Dutch Boy held on a little bit longer, and the last group, Insl-x, ProClassic, Advanced, and Emerald had the best durability. After running this side-by-side test, I can now confidently say that I have found the best hybrid Alkyd paint for cabinets and furniture. And that best paint is Sherwin-Williams Emerald. Now, if they're not running a sale and I don't want to spend a ton of money on paint, I have a budget-friendly option that also performed very well. And that paint is Insl-x Cabinet Coat. I'll definitely use this paint again, especially if I'm planning to brush or roll my project. But if I want to spray, this one is not the option. And instead, I'm going to reach for Dutch Boy, cabinet door, and trim paint. I will probably use the semi-gloss instead of the satin next time to hopefully avoid some of those scuff marks. I sincerely hope that this side-by-side comparison was helpful to you in picking out the best paint for your next project. If it was, or if you like what you saw, be sure to check out my other side-by-sides over here.